got a good chunk of you in. That code is going to stay in the upper right-hand corner. Please join if you have not already. We want to know what motivated exploration, but as always, if we're going to identify motives, we need to know whose motives we're talking about. Who are these people making the earliest moves in the age of exploration? The peoples we need to focus on are the Portuguese and the Spanish. They were the earliest movers on the age of exploration. Riley, do you have your computer? Let's get that open. If you don't, I've got paper copies. Elmer, do you still have your paper notes from yesterday? You still have the paper? There you go, Elmer. And of the two, the Portuguese went first. So Portugal is the smaller country here, the Iberian Peninsula at the southwestern tip of Europe. And Portugal is first, largely thanks to one man, Prince Henry the Navigator. He launched the age of exploration. He didn't do this by actually navigating the seas himself. And this is something important to understand about history. A lot of times, history focuses on the people who have the big adventures, right? Fight the big battles. But equally important, in many cases, if not most, are the people doing much quieter things in the background. Right? So we focus on Christopher Columbus, which we did earlier. Even though Christopher Columbus didn't find the place he thought he was, managed to commit some early genocide and horrible human rights abuses of indigenous people, right? And even so mismanaged things that he ended up being arrested by his own people and drugged back to Europe. Right? We still focus on people like him. He had the big adventures. And we don't pay as much attention to some of the people that made those adventures possible. Right? Here we're going to do that. Right? Henry the Navigator kicked off the age of exploration by starting a school. It's not a terribly exciting thing to do, founding a school. But it was crucially important in giving Portugal the lead in the age of exploration. And at least his own people recognized him for his achievement, because even though he wasn't an explorer, they still give him the honorary title of the Navigator. So what motivated people like Prince Henry the Navigator? When we talk about the motives for the age of exploration, not just for Henry, but for other Portuguese and Spanish, especially the monarchs who would fund these adventures of exploration and the actual explorers and their crews themselves, we talk about it in terms of the 3 G's. The first is God, and there is clearly a linkage here. One of the awards for explorers is Henry's Christian Order, and this is Prince Henry the Navigator's Christian Order. That was a way of being honored for your achievements, and it was very much linked to the church. So this motive, God is the shorthand, but what it means is that Europeans had a desire to spread Christianity. Remember, our early leaders here are Spain and Portugal. They are Catholic kingdoms, and both at this time had a recent history of fighting against Muslims. And I'm not talking about fighting against Muslims far off in the Holy Land or in what is now Turkey. The Spanish and the Portuguese were fighting Muslims in their own kingdoms, right, to make their own kingdoms. What you can see here in this shaded yellow area of the map is North Africa. And that part of North Africa was and is predominantly Muslim. There's not much of a gap separating the tip of the Iberian Peninsula from the tip of Muslim North Africa. And Muslims from North Africa, for a long time, controlled a lot of this territory. They were the Moors. You can still see traces of their architecture and their legacy in places like Spain. The Spanish language itself partly has to credit Arabic for some of its linguistic construction. But Spanish and Portuguese had fought to push the Muslims out of the Iberian Peninsula. This was what they called the Reconquista, right? The reconquest, right? To take it back. And this back and forth between Muslims and Christians in this part of Europe had been going on for a long time. In fact, that's kind of how Charles the Great got to be who he was. His father was famous for defeating the Muslims at a famous battle way up in what is now France. So there's a long history of this. And right as we're getting to the age of exploration, the Spanish and the Portuguese have had their big triumph in reconquering their kingdoms and reconquering the Iberian Peninsula, which again is simply the name for this piece of land that contains Spain and Portugal. And again, they're doing this by taking it back from the control of the Moors. And the idea now is, having reconquered their own land, they're now going to continue their mission and spread Christianity around the world. And they do this. This is the reason that to this day, Latin America is predominantly Catholic Christian. That's starting to change. The evangelicals make more headway, but it's a lasting legacy of what the Spanish and Portuguese did. Now, I just want to kind of get a check on your own opinions, because we've dealt with religious motives off again, on again for a while. How genuine do you think the God motive was for these people? I'm not assuming that you've researched these people in the past. I don't want you to research them now. I just want to kind of get a sense, based on what we've been learning, how genuine you think religious motives are when people claim them to justify their actions. All right, and we've got a range of opinions here, really pretty evenly balanced from end to end. Let's see if I can Shrink. Nope, it won't let me shrink that down. Okay. And if you're looking to me for an answer, I don't have one. We're going to see other motives that were important, but this era, right, to kind of give you some context, is beginning a little bit before the Protestant Reformation. It continues on after the Protestant Reformation, and some of this is still going on as the 30 Years' War is being fought. Religious motives are important. But as we're going to see, they're certainly not the only ones. And it's up to you to decide which motives mattered most. The second motive is gold. And gold here is shorthand, not for actual money, gold, but for wealth. Because from the outset, what the Europeans are hoping to find, those early Spanish and Portuguese explorers, is not actual gold. It's not that they wouldn't be happy to find it, but it's not what they're after in the first place. Instead, they're looking for luxuries from Asia. Because Europeans had gotten a taste from these during the Crusades, and mainly, when I say getting a taste of these, right, taste is actually quite accurate because we're referring to spices like cloves and cinnamon, and supposing that could be like nutmeg or something. The problem for Christian Europeans was that Muslims controlled the flow of these spices. It goes back to our intro to globalization and that map of the spice trade. Now, Christian Europeans weren't totally cut out of this, but it was very limited involvement. And the Muslims dealt with the Italian middlemen. This is not an accident. Remember, it was Italian merchants who made money during the Crusades, taking Crusaders' money to sell them supplies, sell them passage by ship to the Holy Land, and then once they dumped the Crusaders to go fight in the Holy Land, they filled up their ships with goods from Muslims and brought them back to sell in Europe. This relationship had continued for, by this point, several centuries, more like 4 centuries. Other Europeans get tired of having to deal with the Italian middlemen because the Italian middlemen are growing fantastically wealthy by controlling the spice trade, or at least by controlling the flow of spices from Italy to the rest of Europe. This is what funds the Renaissance. I know we haven't talked about the Renaissance yet. We will. So part of the motive is to break the Muslim-Italian stranglehold on the spice trade. But later, especially as gold and silver are found, the pursuit of these traditional sources of wealth, right, not just the metals, but also precious stones like diamonds, become a major motivation for exploration. And the third motive is glory. So we've got God, gold, and glory. I'm telling you this because some of you are going to have been like programmed by the bumper sticker, right? And you're going to want to think that it's like God, guns, and glory or something like that. Not the same 3 G's. Don't mix it up with the American bumper sticker. Right? It's gold, it's God, gold, and glory. And by glory, what we're really talking about is bragging rights. Look at us. We got to this before you did. We found it before you did. This is ours. our conquests are bigger than your conquests. Right? Our empires are bigger than your empires, richer than your empires. Certainly, they should not be bragging about their ability to draw maps. I mean, this isn't horrible, and I should give them credit. Given the limits on their technology, this is pretty good. But they've got like some big scale problems. This is supposed to be India, and this would be Malaysia. They're not the same size. And then that thing is huge, whatever that's supposed to be. And so these are problems. And I believe that's probably supposed to be China. That's not enough to be China. And Japan also not shaped like a tadpole, with a unicorn tadpole kind of thing going on there. But they could at least brag about their conquests and their empires. Having been introduced to all these motives, but thinking for yourself, right? If you were in this position, what motive would be most important to you? Would it be God, gold, or glory?